work, raise a family, and enjoy the fruits of their labor without fear. Now, the Chief's latest crime data that was reported for the first quarter is very encouraging. Homicides were down and crime has been down, but we know we are on the precipice of the hot summer months when violence tends to peak. And during that time, as we lead into the summer months when gun violence can increase, we are taking firm and concrete action to keep our communities safe. We are prioritizing cases for federal prosecution. Cases involving illegal possession of guns, gun trafficking and straw purchasing, armed gangs and drug traffickers, and shootings in our community. This is a partnership not just among federal prosecutors and law enforcement, but among our DA's office led by District Attorney Billy West as well. We are working together every other week, shoulder to shoulder, looking for ways to make Fayetteville safer. The hard work of the agencies here today is responsible for 17 indictments of 17 defendants facing a total of over 30 federal charges. I want to be clear that the matters we talk about today are merely allegations and that each and every defendant is innocent unless and until proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There are also practical and legal reasons why we cannot get into some of the details of these matters. I'm not going to recite the evidence here. That will happen in court, and we look forward to the opportunity to make a showing in court. We won't say anything that could impact the course of any ongoing investigation or any pending criminal case. But I do want the community to know that these operations are making a significant impact. Law enforcement seized 16 guns, including 4 auto-sear machine gun switches used to convert handguns into fully automatic weapons. We've also seized 1,500 rounds of ammunition, nearly 1 kilogram of cocaine, 1 ounce of fentanyl, and 100 pills dosed with fentanyl and MDMA, also known as ecstasy. I want the public to be aware that pills that look just like these, pressed into multicolored shapes and sizes, made to look like candy, made to look like vitamins, or made to look like legitimate prescription medication, are on the streets. Parents should beware, and no one should take any pill unless they have received it prescribed from their doctor through a pharmacist. These pills can kill. I mentioned Glock auto-sear switches. This is a tiny switch that fits in the palm of a hand and can convert any semi-automatic Glock handgun into a fully automatic machine gun. Shooters should beware. If you commit a crime of violence or a drug trafficking offense and use a switch in your gun in furtherance of that crime, you will face a 30-year mandatory minimum in federal prison. I want to speak some about our efforts to combat violent crime. One of the most important ways to reduce gun violence is to keep guns out of the wrong hands. I know no one who has more zeal for this work or is more dedicated to the cause than Assistant United States Attorney Chad Rhodes. Chad leads our Violent Crime Action Plan, or VCAP, here in the city of Fayetteville, alongside several other law enforcement leaders who are with us today. 8 of the 17 defendants charged today are felons who are alleged to have possessed firearms. That is an offense that can carry up to 15 years in federal prison under the new bipartisan Safer Communities Act. 2 of those defendants are alleged to have been involved in shootings at local hotels. 1 allegedly opened fire on a housekeeper. The other allegedly shot at police through the door of a hotel room while they were investigating another incident of a shot fired, which pierced through a hotel wall and entered the room where another family was staying. Our violent crime operation has seized those fully automatic machine guns I mentioned, one of which was used in a shooting just 10 days prior. The team with you will stand up for the community, will continue to fight to save lives, and we will not slow down. Shooters should beware that the ATF is here with us in the room and that their federal agents and task force officers are fast-tracking shooters for federal prosecution. Now I want to speak about our efforts to combat drug addiction. That is through our Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. We know that work must be done to reduce the demand for drugs in America. And I'm pleased to see a large amount of money being rolled out to counties to help deal with drug addiction and to provide intervention strategies to get people's lives on the right track. But we also have to cut out the source of supply, the Mexican cartels and the local dealers that push dangerous and addictive methamphetamine and fentanyl into our communities. That is best handled in our federal courts by the Federal Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, which partners with local law enforcement like our chief of police here, our sheriff, our local state DA to identify the most significant pushers of drugs and find ways to disrupt and dismantle the criminal networks that drive them. It is a prosecutor-led, intelligence-driven, multi-agency approach. We in the Eastern District of North Carolina are putting new emphasis on organized crime cases. And at this moment, we have more organized crime and drug trafficking operations open in the Eastern District of North Carolina than we have ever had in the history of our office. So much so that we have received 4 additional federal prosecutor positions to further those efforts, combating violent crime, gangs, and other matters. As for the cases discussed today, 8 of the 17 defendants are charged with drug trafficking. 3 are charged with armed fentanyl trafficking and 5 with meth trafficking. As alleged in court, 5 defendants are alleged to be members of a methamphetamine trafficking organization led by Rick Durrell McIntyre, a former federal felon based right here in Fayetteville. The organization is believed to have trafficked, as alleged in court, multi-kilogram quantities of highly pure methamphetamine for years. Search warrants were executed last week at 6 residential and commercial locations in Fayetteville and the surrounding area. Drugs, guns, and cash were seized, including 2 high-end luxury vehicles, a 2021 Mercedes and a 2022 Cadillac Escalade. We are filing forfeiture notices to seek over $1 million forfeited, as well as property, including a residence and a business that was used to allegedly facilitate the drug trafficking offense. The task force partnership in Fayetteville is strong, and the cases are far-reaching. We are also announcing today that we have secured convictions against a Fayetteville-based set of defendants in an international fentanyl trafficking ring with direct ties to the Sinaloa cartel. The organization used Fayetteville as a hub, supplying dozens of kilograms of fentanyl throughout the United States, Chicago, Baltimore, and Atlanta included. A federal jury found Hector Perez Valenzuela guilty after he was caught with 7 kilograms of pure fentanyl in a traffic stop that came from a Fayetteville stash house. The kilos found in the traffic stop were locked in a toolbox, wrapped in electrical tape, and covered in grease in an ill-advised effort to throw off drug dogs. According to the DEA, 1 kilo of fentanyl is enough to kill, potentially, 500,000 people. Pictured here are the 7 kilograms of highly pure, synthetic, Sinaloa cartel-connected fentanyl. Each of those kilograms of fentanyl has the ability to kill 500,000 people, with just 2 milligrams being a deadly dose. Upon opening those secured packages of fentanyl, law enforcement found giant bricks of 1 kilogram of fentanyl mashed with a Mickey Mouse insignia. Another photo of that fentanyl with a Mickey Mouse logo sealed in front. Ladies and gentlemen, the 7 kilograms of fentanyl that were seized in this operation had the ability to completely wipe out the populations of Raleigh, Wilmington, Newbern, Goldsboro, and Fayetteville. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I want to close by talking about the consequences of these actions. Mr. Valenzuela, in that case, which has been seen through to conviction, faces up to 40 years in federal prison. But the consequences are also borne by you and I, by our families, by our communities, by so many who bear the pain and the trauma of addiction and loss. Scarcely anyone among us doesn't know someone who has been touched by this crisis. That's why partnering with the community on these matters is so critical. I want to commend Chief Braden for his community-led initiatives, for his partnership, for the trust that he builds. I want to thank Mayor Colvin for the outreach and the voices that he gives to so many who have felt marginalized and voiceless for too long, because it is those communities that too often bear the brunt of the gun violence and the drug addiction that continue to ravage in the corners of our community that too many don't want to think about or don't want to care about. The folks standing here today do care, and we won't stop our work until we ensure that everybody in every corner of every community can live free, can enforce their rights. We will make every effort to ensure that our communities are safer, more fair, and more free. With that, I'd like to invite Chief Braden forward for some remarks.
The only thing I can add to what Attorney Easley has stated today is that our partnership does remain strong. As many of you know, the bulk majority of my career has been spent in operations, conducting investigations such as these. So many of the people behind us today I've worked with throughout my career. So I just want to reiterate that our partnership with our federal agencies and the U.S. Attorney's Office remains strong in order to keep the Fayetteville community safe and secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I have to mention the federal agencies that were involved today, to include the FBI. And I want to give our representative from FBI an opportunity to speak. But I also have to acknowledge the leadership of our District Attorney, Billy West. He is a critical partner in this initiative. There is no daylight between state and federal prosecutors in Eastern North Carolina. We are in constant contact, looking for opportunities as to which agency can provide the more certain or more appropriate outcome in a given case. So District Attorney West, if you would you come forward? Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I want to first thank United States Attorney Easley for leading this effort. This is a strong partnership between local, state, and federal prosecutors as well as law enforcement officers. And it really comes down to three key areas that you've already heard about. And I just want to reiterate the Cumberland County District Attorney's Office commitment in these three areas. The first that we've heard about is drug trafficking. We have many resources here in our court system and in our community for those that are drug addicted, and we want to continue to encourage those to use those resources. However, if you are a drug trafficker in our community, we are going to aggressively pursue prosecuting you, charging you for that drug trafficking. We've heard the dangers of all these drugs, particularly the dangers of fentanyl, and we're seeing that in our community. And we have all known people that have lost their life to fentanyl and fentanyl-related drugs. The second is the illegal weapons, and that we're going to continue to enforce laws dealing with illegal weapons, seize illegal weapons. Many of our young people, there's an education piece to this, that they need to understand the dangers of firearms, but they also need to quit treating firearms like a fashion accessory. They are not. In many cases, they are illegal, and certainly for people that do not have a legal right to carry them, they absolutely should not have them. So we'll continue to enforce those laws. And then the violence in our community. While the numbers are decreasing, and I applaud Chief Braden, the sheriff, and everyone for their work on that, we've had way too much gun violence in our community, senseless murders, senseless shootings that are taking lives, maiming people for life, and that sort of thing. And we'll continue to aggressively prosecute those cases in whatever jurisdiction is most appropriate, whether it be state jurisdiction at the courthouse or whether it be at the federal courthouse with U.S. Attorney Easley. So again, I would applaud the U.S. Attorney's Office for leading this effort, and we'll continue to be committed to it.
Thank you, sir. I want to give an opportunity to recognize the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They work in so many ways, seen and unseen, to keep our communities safe. No agency that I have worked with appears to bring such a wide array of expertise to cases. The FBI's mandate is so broad and their expertise is so unique that they become critical players on cases like these. They have CPAs, they have lawyers, they have former federal agents in other capacities, former military, former local police officers who become Federal Bureau of Investigation agents. And that breadth of expertise can be incredibly valuable. ATF's value contributed to how we identify these firearms and trace them to the shooters that are involved. And of course, DEA for their ability to identify criminal networks connected to international cartels and push up market to identify the networks that are driving these offenses. But I'd like to invite our FBI Assistant Special Agent Nate Obrey forward. He is an Assistant Special Agent in charge, sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina, but covering all of North Carolina. Our local resident agent in charge is David Smith, who partners with Assistant United States Attorney Caroline Webb on a daily basis to identify cases to prioritize for federal prosecution. Nate, if you could come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The FBI greatly appreciates the opportunity to be a part of these task force. All of these individuals up here before you have dedicated substantial resources to get the results that we've discussed here today. These investigations are long, they're methodical, they're well thought out, but leveraging the resources of everybody here has this kind of result to impact and help our communities. We cannot do this alone. Our work is not done. We need the members of the community to speak up, have the courage to call us, let us know. If you see this activity going on, we want to know about it so we can do something about it. Please call 1-800-CALL-FBI so we can come out and help. Thank you.
Thank you. We can try to take a few questions, as I mentioned, because many of these are pending matters. We are very constrained in what we can say to what is already in the public record or otherwise presented in court. As I've mentioned, anyone who has not been convicted of any offense is innocent until proven guilty. So we are cautious to share what information we can and nothing more. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's so true that you have to partner with folks who are here in the city and in the county to get anything done. We find that criminal networks in any capacity tend to not see boundaries in terms of cities and counties. And as it relates to things that may be outside of the city, it's common for our chief to reach out to our sheriff and to have that partnership sort of going live back and forth with good, sound communication and teamwork. And so, as you've identified, there were some properties where search warrants were executed and where the United States will be seeking forfeiture of properties, assets, cash, to the extent that anything was used in furtherance of a drug trafficking operation. We are entitled and we will seek to recover those funds, not just to ensure that we combat crime, but to ensure that crime doesn't pay. Right, so we have two streams here. One is our Violent Crime Action Plan, or our VCAP, and that focuses on our effort to get guns out of the wrong hands and focus on felons who are dangerous in possession of firearms. That VCAP initiative is led by Assistant United States Attorney Chad Rhodes, and the last 2 months have resulted in a number of VCAP indictments and arrests, but that's been an ongoing effort working with the Fayetteville Police Department and the others here in the room, where every other week we're moving forward with cases. So over the course of the last year, we've indicted far more than just 17 cases in the context of that VCAP initiative. But that is a number of these. I think it was 8 of the 17 were felons in possession of firearms, and that is an ongoing effort. And you'll continue to see waves of cases being brought federally when appropriate. Some will be with the state DA for priority prosecution. For example, when you have a habitual felon, our district attorney can get sometimes a heavier and more substantial or more appropriate sentence in state court. And so that's an ongoing partnership. We're just announcing this wave of indictments as we lead into summer to really ensure that the public knows we're standing up for them, we're taking the gun violence issue seriously, and to send a message to those who would consider over the course of this summer picking up or carrying a gun. They should know that this partnership is live and that they will face the same consequences and outcome that these individuals have. So those are largely VCAP cases being individual cases. Yes, sir. It is a big concern and one that we are sharing and focused on nationwide. As you know, there is a mechanism to prosecute juveniles in the state system where those who engage in incredibly dangerous adult activity will be bonded over as adults and prosecuted as adults when appropriate and as the statute allows. Those are very difficult judgment calls because quite often you have very senior members of gangs and organized crime networks who know that they have a prior felony. And so they use these young kids as holsters, folks to carry their guns. And when a kid is carrying a gun and is going through all that youth involves, very foolish decisions can be made to use that gun over very trivial instances. And that is something that law enforcement is really working on solutions for. One thing that we're doing here in Fayetteville, which was an innovation of Chief Gina Hawkins, is creating videos and modules and trainings to go into the local school district and have these conversations and educate these kids on the outcomes, the consequences, the decision making, and the refusal skills necessary to decline involvement in criminal activity. It is a really serious concern. It's one I met on this week with the team to look for other ideas on how we can engage with youth. But it ultimately is going to come down to our community to speak up when they know that a young person is sliding down a difficult or dangerous path. We've got to have resources to deal with those issues that don't involve them walking away in handcuffs if we can get ahead of violence before it happens. It's a very serious concern and among our top priorities and focus areas as we lead into this year. Yes, sir.
So, knock off with one drug person. Obviously, they're not doing it by themselves. How are you going about getting the second and the third is going to step in and take over? Secondly, part of it, are you doing anything for those that have overdosed and making sure that they're being addressed as far as that person? So my child.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll try to do each of those. So we mentioned the VCAP initiative with Gilbert's question. And now I'll talk about the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. There were two operations we talked about today. One was the case involving the 7 kilograms of pure fentanyl that was seized. That case was indicted, charged, and went to trial, and we received a guilty verdict in that trial. The second operation that we've talked about, and I want to be sure that we're keeping these separate, is the operation that involved Rick McIntyre. In that case, that is at the charging stage, and he's been alleged to have been involved in a criminal organization that was involved in methamphetamine trafficking. So we've got the fentanyl case that was convicted that is unrelated to Mr. McIntyre, and we have a methamphetamine conspiracy that has been alleged and indicted. And in a case like a criminal network engaged in drug trafficking, I'll speak more generally now, not about either of those specific cases. One of the unique tools that we have in the federal system is the ability to indict cases and provoke cooperation. And those who have been involved with federal prosecution in the past should know that the only path out when you're facing federal prosecution is to cooperate, to give up your sources and provide the information that we need to build a bigger, more broad, and more impactful case. And so, for example, the case that involved the fentanyl, it was only through cooperation and gathering evidence and information in the course of lower level operations that we were able to identify the broader criminal network. And so the hope is that by focusing our efforts on the most significant movers in our area, that we can then roll that information higher into criminal organizations and eventually all the way back through the help of the Drug Enforcement Administration, who's with us today, back to the cartel sources of supply that are bringing fentanyl into the United States. And we want a large and clear message to be shown that we do not want fentanyl in eastern North Carolina. Now, your second question related to what about folks who have overdosed? Well, we can't just focus on prosecuting large criminal networks that act from far out of North Carolina when it's quite often the local dealers who are lacing this fentanyl into their drug supply in ways that drug users can't predict. Every young person needs to know this is not 2008. You cannot dabble with drugs in 2023. Fentanyl is laced into everything we're seeing. The risk is tremendous. You are rolling the dice with your life. And as to the dealers who were lacing fentanyl into their supply to make it more addictive so they can make more money, we will prosecute you for death by distribution, and you will face serious sentences in federal prison.
Hi, this might be a question for Mayor Colvin. Can you speak to the environmental factors that make Fayetteville uniquely vulnerable to drug trafficking and gun possession to this extent?
Absolutely, and Mayor, would you like to come forward? This is an area I'm very passionate about. I would say that we as a society have got to accept that there is a whole lot of history and there's a whole lot of societal issues involving disparities in housing, in healthcare, in education, in opportunity, in jobs that lead people to a place where they can be victimized and where they don't feel that they can raise their voice and raise their hand and call out to law enforcement to come and help them. And so the folks that are here in the room, we talk about this regularly as to how we can build trust with the community and be sure that they know that they're seen and they're heard and that we're here to help them, but we don't have the ability to control that entirely on our own. And so it is my hope that some of the money that's rolling out from the big opioid settlements goes into these communities and meets people where they are and delivers resources to help break cycles of addiction and trauma that lead to this kind of conduct and these kinds of outcomes. It's incredibly important. I know it's something that the mayor, the district attorney, and the chief care a lot about. Would you?
Well, U.S. Attorney nailed it. Certainly we have communities in our people in our community, in these marginalized communities that are impacted the most by guns and drugs. And so I don't know that Fayetteville is unique to that, but what I know is that we have prioritized that in the leadership from a policy perspective to make sure that our local police department has the resources to not only deal with people after the fact, but also proactively to work with our local communities.
All right, thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. I will leave these to the extent anybody wants to capture them. And to just note again, these 3 fentanyl-related images track to the Valenzuela case. These are examples of press pills. They are not press pills seized in any operation that we're talking about here today, but that were resulted from another prosecution that occurred last week. A press release went out in that matter, so if you want to feature this, you can look at the press release that this image keys to. These are photos of pressed pills which were made in a clandestine laboratory. This is an example photo of a Glock switch, which can convert a semi-automatic Glock handgun into a fully automatic machine gun. We're very concerned about these. They continue to turn up in cases, including the cases that we've talked about here today. We are prioritizing those for federal prosecution, and those who spray bullets indiscriminately with fully automatic machine guns in furtherance of their violence or their drug trafficking will be met with stern consequences. We find that often those who are trafficking drugs will use commonly known or recognized insignias, and they'll purchase those insignias in what are like large dies that they will press into their products. And just the way that companies want to brand their products, drug traffickers want to brand their products too, so that somebody can say, oh, well, you know, I got that Gucci fentanyl and it was perfect last time, send me more of that. And so they will press well-known logos into their products. And we have had cases where certain pills will be pressed with an M30 insignia and they look exactly like a legitimate prescription medication. And as well as Xanax, pills that are pressed to look exactly like Xanax, indistinguishable. And so when a kid at a party is having a beer and decides that somebody's going to offer them a Xanax and they'll have a bite, that can be the end of their lives. And we have to stress, do not take any pill that you have not gotten legitimately subscribed from a pharmacy. Thank you.